Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz, and
Hello.
Today we're doing a little bit of a different format than we usually do. I think this is more of like a review / debate episode.
Yeah, it's a weird little recap episode that we have been talking about for not very long at all. But we're going to try and do things just a little different, like Robin said, for this episode. But before we get into that, Robin, how has your past week been?
So, we had Level Up this past weekend, a Level Up Expo in Vegas, so that was pretty cool.
It was wonderful to have you come out here while I'm in Vegas and get to actually see you out here. So the dogs were just as excited as I was to see you.
It was definitely great to see you and Spooky Mom and hang out with the doggos and the kitty cat. And it was kind of nice to see conventions, I guess, returning to what they usually are, you know, full scale, all the special guests, things like that.
You guys had a booth right by, or I shouldn't say right by, but near enough to the wrestling matches, which are happening at a lot of these conventions that we go to.
Yeah, like literal wrestling ring, like just you can hear bodies slamming. It's crazy.
It's kind of interesting, too, because while you were in town, my plan was initially to go to the Level Up Expo, but at work we have we had this like new thing that just released, and I'm the point person for it. So Thursday was pretty crazy. It's probably actually the craziest day of work I've ever had at the company, without a doubt, and maybe ever. Like, I've done some pretty wild midnight launches for video games at GameStop and things like that, but this definitely is right up there with it. And then Friday was also crazy, and then I had to work Saturday and Sunday because of it. So I actually never wound up getting to go to Level Up Expo and hanging out with you guys, which was a huge old bummer. I was actually really sad about it, but I was busy enough where my sadness didn't overwhelm me. And then like Saturday, I cooked a home cooked meal, and I had this plan to get everything cooked, and I was going to have like a chicken Alfredo with 2 different types of pasta and 2 different types of chicken and garlic bread that was homemade. And as soon as I started, I had just stopped working. I had worked like 10 hours that day, and like 10 minutes later, I got called back to work. So I'm like in the kitchen with all this stuff going, like so many things working, like fucking Mrs. Doubtfire, and trying to like respond to emails and sit in meetings and all this other stuff. And you guys were at Level Up having your own like crazy experiences. So it was definitely a pretty wild weekend. I am exhausted from it, and I'm just 100% drained. So I don't know how you feel after you had to like drive home after Sunday, where you worked at Level Up, then drove home.
I am thankful that I did not drive. Shout out to Jess, you like the real MVP. Yeah, so I didn't have to deal with that. I got to be the spoiled person that sleeps in the back seat. But no, it was a fun weekend. Had to go to work, you know, right after. So it's like you work and then you go to cons on the weekend to work, and then you go back to work.
Yep.
So, and now we're here with more work.
More fun stuff. So this week, let's go ahead and move into our episode. I wanted to do things a little different. So if you hate this, you can blame me. Robin had some creative suggestions to make it better, but this was sort of my brainchild, so it just depends on how you like it. If you like it, give all the credit to Robin, because it's probably the tweaks that she made that made it good. So to this point, we have done over 400 individual topics. In fact, it's probably closer to 450, because this is episode 220. Some episodes we've had 3 topics, and some episodes we've had like compilations of topics, because like a single topic wasn't enough, so we just had like, you know, curses or something like that, where we did small curses. So we've covered a lot. And now we have some series that we revisit pretty typically, like Haunted Hollywood or paranormal games that you folks are used to. But for the individual topics, we typically don't cycle back, like at all. After a few posts we've seen recently on our social media, including one from Travis on the Spooky Friends group, I've been noticing some folks have been having conversations that are similar to conversations that we have in real life with folks when we talk about the show or just talk about scary stuff in general. And it's whether or not something is real. And people often post about like some of the more known hauntings and topics in general to see what other people's takes are on them. And aside from the episode that we gave them, we haven't really circled back on pretty much any of them. But we talk about them often in our personal life. So for this episode, I'd like to sort of pump our brakes and circle back on some of our more notable topics and address if we, the hosts, Robin and I, now that we have done the research and we've had plenty of time to reflect on it, because we've been doing this show for almost 5 years now.
My God.
Right? If we believe these things are real at this point. So I say, in honor of Mythbusters and how awesome that amazing show was, we use the ratings of busted, plausible, or confirmed. They don't really apply.
They don't apply to any of these, really.
I just love the show. I was thinking about it today, and I love those 3 ratings. So try and use those. So how we'll handle this is we're going to cover 6 former topics, 3 from me and 3 from Robin. We'll give each a brief synopsis of what that topic was. We're not going to do the whole script all over again. We're just going to sort of remind you what it was, and any pertinent information that needs to be reminded, especially for those of us with bad memories. I can't even remember what I covered last week. And then the other person will state what they rate this, whether it's busted, plausible, or confirmed to them, and why. And then we'll sort of have a little bit of discussion. So I'm really excited to do this. In fact, in the future, I'm sure we'll circle back again. And when we do, I would love to ask our patrons to pick some of the topics we'll revisit, maybe some of the folks in the Spooky Friend group as well. So if you guys are listening to this episode, one of my favorite things about how we're going to do this is the title, For the First Time in Forever, which is my favorite song from Frozen. The title does not give away what we're going to be covering. So you have to wait and actually listen to us go through these. And if you have one that you're hoping we cover, there's 6 chances from this point until the end of the show that we're going to cover it. And if we don't, drop the feedback on our social medias and let us know which ones you'd love to hear us cover in a future episode. So we have Instagram that you can leave a comment on, Facebook, Spooky Friend group, Twitter, wherever you want to reach out to us and say, man, I really wish you guys would revisit this particular topic. So we would love to hear from you. That said, let's get this thing started. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Robin. Robin, what is the first topic we're going to revisit and then talk about how we feel about it after the fact?
All right, so you'll all remember this topic from one of the first episodes that we ever did, and it's going to be the El Chupacabra, the goat sucker, that one. I think it was like episode 3 or something.
So this is the way, way back.
Yeah, way, way back. Back to the beginning. This is probably one of the cryptids that kind of introduced a lot of you into the world of cryptids. I know, at least for me personally, there is a reason I had that be one of my first topics that I ever covered, right? Because it's like one of the ones that are really well known, and I feel like these days maybe Mothman, it's between Mothman and the Chupacabra, or you know, like Bigfoot, right?
Or the
like
Loch Ness
hitters.
Monster.
Yeah. I don't know. These days, I'm like, Mothman is more man than moth. He's not, you know what I mean? He's just, I don't know. He's become this sexy 6-pack figure dude.
I agree with you. He's become more of a sex symbol than a cryptid.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just think this one is always going to have a special place in my heart. Not biased or anything. But we know this creature to be like a mysterious animal-like cryptid that's appeared in both the US and across Latin America, and as well as a few other countries around the world. It's most notably known for the act of sucking livestock completely dry in blood context. And it's
not
like,
in the semen context. It's not the blowjob monster.
It's like the vampire of the farming world. I don't think there's ever been a report of a Chupacabra sucking the blood of a human being. Mostly it's just animals. So the legend of El Chupacabra kind of dates back decades, and it stems from the discovery of large amounts of livestock being found dead with puncture wounds in their necks and drained of blood. And this included like really big livestock too, like cows and things like that. In my original topic, I said I think there was like 15 cows that were found, as well as all the so these animals didn't get mauled or like scratched up or clawed. They were just sucked of their blood. The thing about the Chupacabra is that it looks like a dog. and the damage that the animals take don't really seem like they come from any dog or coyote. And this creature is just described to look like one, or something similar to that of a dog. So it has like large ape-like legs, but it has like a body of something like a reptile or a lizard. It also has, small little arms. It's scaly with like a spiky spine, large red eyes, some fangs, a forked tongue, and a sulfur-like odor. So I think, why don't you tell us your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you recapped that because I forgot about the sulfur-like odor part. So, as far as the Chupacabra goes, I think this is one of those that's as close to confirmed as you're going to get, simply because what everyone thinks of as the Chupacabra is essentially what has been photographed and filmed multiple times, which looks like a dog with mange. It's an animal that we know, and it starts behaving differently because of a disorder or disease.
I don't think that's confirmed then.
But like what I think has happened is there's a version of the Chupacabra from the legend, which is very much distinct by its victims. Giant cows, 14 giant cows being drained of its blood. Like even a human vampire would have trouble sucking that much blood. And it seems odd that a small creature, even if it was a lizard-like creature that's very big, would be able to exhume or exsanguate or whatever the word is, all the blood from an animal that large and then do it 13 more times, I think that there's probably something to be said about that behavior and then it being blamed on something like the Chupacabra. But, I heard this legend growing up. I heard this from my grandfather, that there were these creatures that would suck the livestock's blood and they would ruin people's lives. And, I never pictured it as like a dog-like creature until I got a little bit older, and then I started seeing more and more people depict it that way. The original depiction of it, like having scaly skin and stuff like that and being really tall, basically like a lizard vampire, is what I always pictured it as until I sort of saw the new interpretation of it. I think it's one of the more likely cryptids to be rooted in some form of truth, just probably with like different elements of like sensationalism mixed in.
I don't know. To me, I think it's just a dog or a coyote, like a canine-like creature with mange. And if it's a wild dog, it could be extremely malnourished. And if you've seen like those Instagram videos where there's these wild dogs that get picked up and taken care of, and when they're picked up, they got like mites and stuff like that, and
no fur. They look nothing like they
because mange results in dogs like losing their hair, so they're patchy and weird looking if it gets really, really bad. And then these dogs that are really malnourished, their spines look sharp through their skin.
Right.
You can see every single little thing, right? And then dogs have those eye reflective things when light shines on them a certain way. And they also they just look awful when they have mange. And then if you add rabies, they kind of get really vicious. So then you have these demon-like doggos, right? But there could be some legendary creature out there that really does suck the blood out of vampires. I mean, if there's bunnies out there that can suck the life out of vegetables, there has to be a creature out there for livestock.
Are you talking about Banicula?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So here's the thing, like what it could be, and this is funny because the same reason I'm calling it confirmed is like you're calling it busted. It's like the evidence showing it's a dog with mange. But the victim thing is where I always get hung up on, because it is possible that a farmer exaggerated and then the story got told a million more times and it went from like, my cow got killed last night and it had puncture wounds on its neck and it's drained of its blood, to 14 cows sucked dry, like vampires did this type of thing, where it could have just been like, a rabid dog with mange attacked this guy's cow, ripped its fucking throat out, and it bled to death. So it's always going to be very hard to tell like where the truth is. But I sincerely think that the legend of the Chupacabra is one that comes from an actual creature and actual attacks that have happened.
Nah, I'm going to say plausible.
You're going to go with plausible? Okay, I think that's fair. So
I don't think it's confirmed at all.
Right on. Confirmed it is. We'll go with that.
No.
So,
No.
Agree to disagree.
No.
I think plausible is the way to go, because I think there is an actual creature that people mistake for a Chupacabra that probably behaves like it. I don't think that there's a vampire lizard running around sucking everything dry. So
hot.
All right, well, I'm going to move on to my first one that I wanted to revisit. And so I'm not jumping straight into the cryptids, which I know, kind of shocking. I'm actually going with the Philadelphia experiment. So I don't know how many of you remember the Philadelphia experiment. For the conspiracy theorists that listen to our show, you guys probably just ripped your shirt off and started rubbing your nipples because I'm covering this one again. So as a refresher, the Philadelphia experiment is one of the only quote unquote conspiracy theories that I've ever covered. Typically try and avoid them. People are so far bought into so many conspiracy theories that if like I were to cover the topic and not even give my opinion on it, but I don't cover like all of the variations or the like things that people believe, people get very vicious and lash out. I had feedback on the Philadelphia experiment episode from multiple facets, some within my family, which I will get to, some from total strangers that basically told me like I'm just a sheeple because I don't believe that it actually took place. But for those of you who want to know the story or want to be refreshed, I'll go ahead and give you a quick recap. If you want to listen to the full episode, it's episode 40. So still quite a long time ago. The event in question is supposed to be an experiment that took place in the summer of 1943. Top scientists have been brought in to give the United States an advantage in World War II in various different ways. Most folks know of the Manhattan Project, the project where all these scientists were creating the atomic bomb. That's what the Manhattan Project was. There were also experiments being done in other areas. They didn't put all their eggs in one basket. And one of those areas was radar camouflage. Radar was still fairly new in 1943. It hadn't been around for like 100 years. It had been around for around 10, I think. So people were trying to figure out ways to avoid being detected by a radar. The Philadelphia experiment is said to have been an experiment done on an entire ship with the intention of making it invisible to a radar using electrical current. That is said to have been, depending on which version of this conspiracy theory you want to get into, the cover story for the actual experiment. The actual experiment was supposedly to make the ship turn literally invisible. So the USS Eldridge is the ship this experiment was supposedly carried out on, with the experiment activating and the ship suddenly not being seen by anyone anymore. If this whole thing's true, there was some scientist that was like, "We did it!" And it said what actually happened is the ship did not go invisible, but teleported from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard to Norfolk, Virginia, which is quite a long ways.
What's more realistic, though?
Neither of them,
teleporting,
in my opinion,
or going invisible.
Bending or refracting light around an object to me sounds more possible than having something instantly appear in one space and then another. But I don't know from a theoretical standpoint which one of those is more likely or less likely, because who the fuck knows? Teleportation could be more theoretical than invisibility.
If a boat went invisible and left that harbor and showed up at a different dock, you would see the water moving as the boat moved through it. You know?
Well, I imagine what happened. It's not that it went invisible and then moved. It teleported there. Because it appeared, and this is the other thing about this. The experiment supposedly took place at an undisclosed time, but let's say 10 a.m., all right? You flip the switch, ship disappears. 10 a.m., it is said that the boat was spotted all of a sudden appearing out of nowhere in Norfolk, Virginia at 9:50 a.m., and that it not only moved through space, but time as well, and went back in time 10 minutes. And it sat there for 5 minutes in Norfolk, Virginia, people being like, what the fuck is happening? And then at 9:55, 5 minutes later, it reappeared again over in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. But this time, when it moved back, it had traveled forward 5 minutes. So it traveled back in time, back to the future, 10 minutes. So it left at 10, appeared at 9:50, waited for 5 minutes to 9:55, then went back to its original position, and it was 10:05. So, a lot of weird shit going on in this theory. The people aboard the ship were said to basically have been melted into the ship itself in some horrific fucking grotesque way.
What?
And the devastation that took place to the crew was so horrific that they shut down everything, and that's why the experiment itself was buried, and all the evidence was completely scrapped, and everyone involved and witnessed it were told, keep your fucking mouth shut and don't say a word. So, a lot of the folks that became major players in the conspiracy theory and the telling of this theory were not great at keeping their story straight, and they changed what happened and like details of the event with no evidence whatsoever and no witnesses and no sources. And there are just a ton of variations of what happened here, a ton of variations of who was involved. and how it spun into other things. Some people claim that they were on the ship, that they were from the future. There's a whole lot of weird shit. There's a lot of time travel theories involved with this one. What is known is a lot of crazy experiments took place at that time. Not all of them safe, not all of them ethical. And for an experiment like that to take place, there would have been quite a few participants and witnesses. So, all right, I want to turn it over to you, Robin. What do you think on this one in particular? It's been almost 4 years. You call bullshit still? You were like 100% against this when I covered it the first time too.
I think it's dumb. I think it's possibly the government did find some type of technology, right? I don't think it's because people melted into the ship that they stopped investigating or experimenting. I think they were like, yo, this shit's tight. We can't share it with other people. We're going to pretend we didn't find something cool and then just work on it on the DL, like just not hyping it up to the world.
You're way more of a conspiracy theorist nowadays than you used to be. Because like looking back on old scripts and stuff like that, you definitely didn't propose the crazy bullshit. That was me back in the day. And now you always have like the craziest stuff that you pitch for being the cause of something. So you think they actually created something and then swept it under the rug because they're like, the experiment was successful.
No, so I don't think they actually teleported anything. Maybe they like, I don't know. There's no way they created teleportation technology, right, for an entire ship. But maybe they did. And I'm just saying, if they did, they covered it up. It's not that it didn't work or that it was too terrifying. They're like, we're going to use this against our enemies.
So since this one is so layer upon layer upon layer upon layer shit, let me ask you this and just boil it all the way down. Do you think there was, in any way, shape, or form, a Philadelphia experiment that was performed that was eventually scrubbed from the books?
I could believe that there was an experiment that was performed.
Okay, right on.
And I mean, okay. So trying to be invisible to radar, we have that now.
We do. And it's something we have been researching for a really long time.
So I think it was more along the lines of that type of technology, not necessarily literal invisibility. I don't think it's actual invisibility. I think it's they were trying to make it so you can't see them on a radar, and they maybe succeeded. I don't think they literally disappeared like freaking Wonder Woman's ship or something.
That's so funny. I think I agree with you for the most part. So I still remain really skeptical about this overall. I think it's totally likely that there was an experiment done on an entire boat. Something happened and everyone involved was already told, like, you can't tell anyone about it. And anyone that witnessed it, they were told, keep your fucking mouth shut, basically. It could have been like they were trying to cloak from a radar. They ran an electrical current through a boat and fucking killed everyone because they electrocuted everyone. Like, that could be something that happened. And they were like, sweep it under the rug. We don't want anyone to know that we fucked up so bad. I think that's something that could have been attached. And then, of course, the theories just spin out of control when you put people on it. But here's one thing I will say, and I briefly mentioned this in some random episode after we covered this topic, but I actually spoke to my Uncle Steve back home about this particular episode. He listened to it, and he called me and he told me, like, here's a fun story for you. So they made a movie called The Philadelphia Experiment in the 80s, and it's about this and time travel, and like it's kind of wonky. And my uncle saw it, and then he went over and talked to my grandfather. And as he was talking to my grandfather, he was describing the movie, and he was describing the premise of it, the beginning of the movie. And my grandfather stopped him and says, oh, I know someone who saw that. And my uncle was like, oh, how'd they like the movie? And my grandpa was like, oh, no, not the movie, the boat disappearing. Like, they were told never to tell a soul about it because my grandfather fought in World War II, as a lot of people's grandfathers did. In fact, both my grandfathers did. But he said that they were running all sorts of crazy fucking experiments, and that you would wake up one day and be told, like, you need to be here at this time. Don't say a fucking word to anyone. And that was a pretty standard thing to happen to basically people who were deemed expendable when they were going to be trying to create something that was for the greater good, you know? So
the greater good.
Hearing the account from my grandfather of, oh yeah, I know someone who saw that boat disappear, definitely changed my perspective to be like, it has moved from barely plausible to maybe plausible. And I certainly think there was something that happened that fed into the myth of the Philadelphia experiment. I don't think this thing was spun up out of nowhere. And that's one of the things that makes me most suspicious, is that this is one of those things where if you ask anyone and there's any official investigation of it, they state that no, this never happened. There was never a boat called that. This never happened at this time. And that is the most suspicious thing about it to me. So I put this one now at maybe plausible with a question mark, because I trust my grandfather more than I trust myself. So,
okay, cool. All right, so the next one is probably the most annoying of topics, because Zach Bagans kind of ruined it.
Oh, I know what you're going to do.
Is said about all of this is or was true. So there was that Demon House movie that came out, and it was bad. Like, I wish I could get that hour back of my life. And I say hour because we didn't even get to the part where he went blind. People were like, oh, did you get to the part where he went? I'm like, no, man, we gave up because it is so bad. It is horrible. So the Demon House, this is what we're talking about. This Demon House was in Gary, Indiana, which is a place that Adam is no stranger to. And it was the home to LaToya Ammons, who came to rent it in November of 2011. She and her 3 children experienced what they claim to be possession and like them being terrorized by demons within the home. And they witnessed shadow figures, phantom footprints, levitation, mystery smells, other things like dripping liquids from their blinds, that kind of thing. One of the kids, when taken to the hospital, supposedly being possessed, was witnessed by a nurse to be walking backwards up a wall and onto the ceiling, and landed on his feet, never letting go of his grandma's hand, which I think is a little weird.
Yeah, it's definitely abnormal behavior.
All this craziness resulted in the children being taken away from their mother at one point. And when they were psychiatrically evaluated, the children really believed that they were seeing these shadow people, these shadow creatures, shadow beings. And they, the doctors just put them down as them being negatively impacted by their mother. So the doctors were just, their moms telling them to say this stuff, and that's why they really believe it. So this house, this demon house, had a basement where weird things kept happening with their tech when people tried to like photograph things or take EVPs. There was one report where a police officer went home from the site or something, got to their house, and their garage opener, like their garage would not open, which I think is just coincidental.
Yeah, I was going to say, that happens to a lot of garages.
Eventually, there was a cleaning ritual / exorcism that was done, and some other things that were done to rid the house of the demons. She did eventually get her kids back in November of 2012, and the house has since been demolished post-movie release.
Post-bagels.
Yeah. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
All right, so for the...
I can kind of assume what your thoughts are going to be.
For the demon house, here's what I will say is when you covered it, I had heard of it through friends back home when it happened. I do have family that lives in that area. My dad and his family did grow up in Gary, Indiana. And so when I heard about this, it reminded me very much of some of the stories that my dad has told me about the house he grew up in, which is the Haunting of Carolina Street, I think, is what I named that episode. I can't remember which one it is. It's in the 40s or 50s. All this to say, I wanted to really believe in this one. And the more I learned about it, and the more I saw, this is the thing, hearing the story told through text is one thing. Watching someone tell their own story is another. And watching parts of that documentary and seeing Zach Bagels be as dramatic as he possibly could, seeing everyone involved with it basically asking for money before they would talk about it, the whole thing seems like a bullshit cash grab for them to break their lease and get out of there. And it was like all that was wrapped up with the fact that like CPS got involved and this woman's kids were going to get taken away. And it's just like there seems to be so much happening at that point. And when they talk about the haunting in particular, I'm like, I don't fucking buy this anymore. I consider this one as close to busted as possible after having watched just an hour of the Demon House documentary based off of how full of shit just about every single human being was in that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't believe anything in this one. I mean, I feel bad, but nothing happened in the home prior to their moving in. It was fine, other than being in Gary, Indiana. There was also that dirt in the basement that they were like, oh, there's this dirt patch in the basement. But they could have buried things there themselves,
Right.
you know, to make it seem like, oh, look what we found. I really don't want to say that I don't believe them, but part of me, a big, huge part of me, thinks that it was all done for the money.
And I will say, Zach Bagels tries to talk to the original family about what happened to them, and they don't talk to him because they have a movie deal. And if they talk to him for his documentary, it'll violate the terms of their movie deal, and they won't get paid for their story. And so that whole thing, I was just like, these fucking people, like, it was so hard for me to sit through that.
Yeah, Gary, Indiana is not a good neighborhood. If you folks don't know anything about it, it is a very bad neighborhood. Adam always says that.
It's a very low-income place, so it's not shocking that if people saw the opportunity to tell their story and make a lot of money off of it, that they would take it.
And that's what I was thinking. Maybe they just wanted to get out of there. But if your children are getting taken away from you because you're this deep in the rabbit hole, wouldn't you want to stop, you know, and just focus on getting your kids back instead? But I don't know, because they kept going with the story of, like, you know, our house is haunted. But the fact that Zach kind of bought the property, did the movie thing on it, and then demolished it, you know, it's like he demolishes it because it's too haunted. It's so haunted. It needs to get demolished. But I don't believe that. I think it's a huge publicity stunt, you know, just like him trying to make it seem like, oh, it's so haunted. But really, it's just like, this house is a piece of shit. We're not keeping it. We're going to put it in the movie and make it seem like we're doing it because it's haunted.
It's just really hard to believe anything where the premise goes from, we're going to interview the people involved, to, oh my God, a 12-foot tall demon with a giant boner made me go blind. He literally pretends to be blind in this thing from demonic possession. And it's so unbearable to think that people take this so seriously. They think it actually happened. I can't help but feel like so many of the things they do are parodies at this point, and it just takes all the credibility out of whatever topic they're talking about and throws it right in the garbage.
Right. I mean, the whole thing with the kids, I think kids are easily influenced. I think you can get kids to do whatever you want them to, when you're their mom telling them, like, you are going to do this because we need the money, you know?
Yeah.
I think Zach Bagans demolished the house because he wanted to get rid of any evidence that it was all bullshit. Because I think it's all bullshit.
I think he didn't want to deal with the fact that people would trespass going in there, and it's in a bad neighborhood. It was like pretty much condemned when he bought it, and it was just like on the next step of basically being demolished in the first place. You know, he wasn't going to fix it up and live in it, and he wasn't going to fix it up and rent it out, and he probably wasn't going to be able to sell the damn thing. So he just demolished it for the end of the movie to have like a nice little, it was too haunted in the typical Zach Bagels way. So I'm going with busted on this one.
Same.
Right on. All right, so before we get into the next one, let's take a quick commercial break. All right, and we're back. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the fourth one of the episode, my second one. And I will say Robin has already kind of spoiled this one, but hey, we're going to talk about it because, like she mentioned, this is our beloved lamp-loving boy, the Mothman.
Lamp-loving boy.
So I'm going to give you a recap. I feel like everyone has heard of the Mothman at this point.
Yeah,
but
Moth Daddy.
To give a recap, the Mothman is the name that was given to a large humanoid figure that resembles a man slightly, but has enormous moth wings and red glowing
Wonder
eyes.
What else is enormous.
Wow. It's tall, too. It's like the size of a tall human being, but not given any specific height. If I said it's 6'4", some thirsting moth fan out there probably Robin would be like, oh my God, he's so tall. So, and he'd be like, how big are his feet? I need to know. Anyways, so this creature is said to reside in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is where the Mothman Festival is held every year. And the first known sighting is November 12th, 1966, as a couple was driving home and spotted this big fucking thing flying, asking, hey, do you have a lamp? And it kept following them while they were driving. It was flying, and they're like, we don't have any lamps, go away. But the big reveal of my original script is that even though the Mothman legend is that he's from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, that is actually not true. There's been sightings all over the world of the Mothman, and it's just across all these different time periods. Sightings of the Mothman date back to 1926, when a large humanoid creature that matches the Mothman's description was flying around a dam that would burst days later out in China. They reported it so constantly, the authorities showed up to investigate it, and it was seen more and more often the closer to the dam failing. Like 15,000 people died when that dam burst. It was seen flying around a bridge that I have personally crossed before, which is super creepy because it was seen 2 weeks before it collapsed in 2007, where there was a large loss of life. It was also said to have been seen flying around the Twin Towers in September of 2001, before 9/11. It was in fucking Chernobyl so much that it got a nickname of the Blackbird of Chernobyl before the meltdown, and it was seen flying around the Fukushima power plant and documented on social media by a tourist weeks before the tsunami that happened in 2011 showed up, causing one of the worst nuclear disasters in Japan's history.
There's a picture of that?
It's like it's supposed to be a video that you can find online. I can never find it. It's supposed to be super blurry. And then a German mine where a bunch of mine workers or whatever the fuck they're called. They're not called Minecrafters, so I don't know what their actual title is.
Okay.
But miners, that's it. Holy shit. A bunch of German miners were trying to enter
in there.
We're trying to enter their mine, and this giant humanoid moth man screeched at them. It was enormous. They all ran away from it. They'd like psyched themselves up, like, we have to go back or else we're going to get fired. They went back, and as they were walking there, they realized Mothman is gone. We can get on the elevator and go down to the mine shaft, and it fucking collapsed.
Wow.
So it's known as a hero in that community.
I'm saying that like I'm surprised. I knew this.
Right? And I'm going over this because I wanted to recap a lot of the sightings to let you know that this thing is not relegated to a single place, and it is what is known as a harbinger. It's a sign of impending misfortune. Whether it brings that misfortune itself is still up for debate or interpretation. I ended my original script and I did not remember this, which is why I love that we're doing this. I was still fairly skeptical, but kind of surprised at how much I had found about it all over the world. So, Robin, what do you think about Moth Daddy?
I gotta believe in the Moth Daddy. I want to believe, you know what I mean? I want to believe that he's real. Because wouldn't it be interesting if there was some creature out there like Godzilla who's like, who's just,
So you're saying he's like a kaiju now?
Yeah, he's out there like protecting the people, you know? It's just, wouldn't that be neat? Wouldn't that be neat if there was just this creature out there who's somehow a ripped bug and just like...
I don't know why you interpret him as being super hot nowadays. That's definitely something that's changed since the first time I wrote the script.
But like, it's because of that figure in Point Pleasant, that big silver statue of him that's just like sexy, you know?
Okay.
He's got a six-pack and shit.
I want to ask you this. Take away the sexiness. Take away the want. I get it. You want to believe. Do you think this one is busted, plausible, or confirmed?
I think it's plausible that there's a creature out there who flies around and warns people of imminent doom.
I think if I'm going to believe that the creature is smart enough to warn people of imminent doom...
It could prevent the imminent doom.
Because how would it know, you know? But here's the thing, all right? Of all the topics I have covered on this show, this is the one that has sat in my brain the longest.
It lives up there rent-free?
It lives up there rent-free. I've had showers where the only thing I've thought of the entire time is how fucking crazy all this stuff is and how coincidental all this stuff is. I've done more research on this topic after the fact, just looking shit up on my phone because I want to know more. And all these Mothman sightings are out there. And I become convinced at this point that he is absolutely real. And I prefer to think he's trying to warn folks he's not bringing the disaster. And maybe the appearance is actually some sort of apparatus. I had this theory in the shower one day. It's like, it's not a Mothman. It's something wearing a suit that they need to wear to time travel. So that's why they know these things are
like
going to...
Hawkeye. Not Hawkeye. I'm sorry. What is that one? Falcon?
Yeah, I guess it's like Falcon, except with like fluffy wings instead. So, but I just had this theory, like, it's a time traveler. He's coming back to warn people. These events are time locked. He can't prevent them, which is why he's not trying to prevent them. He's just trying to reduce the amount of deaths at the site, because maybe, just maybe, he knows like the butterfly effect that'll happen will make a better future if he reduces the amount of deaths at specific disasters. This is insane. I understand that. I'm supposed to be the skeptical one. Maybe he's just a plain old cryptid, some sort of demi-moth that is attracted to the bright light of impending doom that only demigods can see, and he flies around it until that ship pops off, and then he just flutters away to his next lamp of doom. It's a possibility, I suppose, as much as anything's a possibility. It is, I will say this.
That's really in-depth of you.
It is unlikely. But the reason my brain spins this sort of shit up for Mothman is because there are so many sightings of this identical creature over 100 years' time, always sort of warning people at the site of some giant disaster that's about to happen. So I'm going to go with plausible on this one. I just feel it in my heart, man. And in my head, I can't reason it down to bust it. So
yeah, I can't bust this one too, because I feel like in order to be busted, you'd have to be like, it's just a bird, or it's just
confirmed hoax.
Right. But I want to believe in Mothman. I'm going to say plausible.
I want to believe in Mothman because I believe Mothman believes in me. So.
Oh, wow. Cute. All right. So I'm going to get into my final one. Is this the final one of the episode?
This is 5 out of 6.
My next one? Okay. So, all right. This next one is going to be DB Cooper. And I think this is one of my personal favorite topics because I just think he's pretty cool, right? It's just such a popular mystery. The fact that they made Loki in the show Loki turn out to be DB Cooper is hilarious. And also a sign of how big of a mystery this DB Cooper thing really was. I think in Doctor Who, the first season, the season with, what's his name? Eccleston. Yeah. He was DB Cooper too. That they showed a bunch of pictures. I'm pretty sure, but I don't remember because it's been so long since I've watched his season. Yeah, it's been a long time
since we watched that one.
But yeah, it's such a big mystery. It's so popular. And as a refresher, DB Cooper was the guy who, on November 24th, 1971, boarded a flight 305 to Seattle for $20. I want to point that out again. He only spent $20 for this fucking flight.
Wow.
He was dressed in a nice white dress shirt, black clip-on tie with a mother of pearl tie pin. Just an overall nice dark colored suit. Pretty nicely dressed guy. He sits in the back of the plane and hands a note to a flight attendant. And on this note, it threatens that he has a bomb in his briefcase. He cracks open the case for the flight attendant to kind of take a peek, and it's enough for her to believe it. Whatever he had in there, it looked like a bomb. She believed it. Anyway, he demanded a ransom of $200,000 in negotiable American currency. And negotiable currency is just cash and coin. Things like that. Apparently, I had to look it up. That in today's money is about $1,300,000. It might be a little more since it's 2022 now and shit's getting real expensive. But this request kind of gave away his nationality. He was American. He also knew the area really well. The authorities get contacted and they get all the ransom in a little more than 2.5 hours. All in $20 bills. That's how he's going to pay for his next flight. Very, very specifically numbered bills. The serial numbers on them were very specifically numbered. They were meticulous about it, but he was also very meticulous about it. Everything he did was very thought through. The plane had to refuel at some point. I think it refueled like twice. Mid-flight, Cooper, with his money, gets off the plane. He like drops one of the stairs in the back of the plane and jumps out with one of the, what are those things called? Parachutes. When the plane lands, it's surrounded by like FBI authorities, all that, and he is nowhere to be seen. He is gone. They had fingerprints, like unidentified fingerprints. They had his tie and his tie clip. They tested where he could have jumped from, like at what point in time during the flight. There were a lot of mistakes made and calculations and testing. It was like they tried all these things and none of them worked to find this mystery
I feel like some dude like picked a spot he could have jumped and just like stood there on the ground and like licked his thumb. And I was like, yeah, he probably went that way.
There were, well, they shoved a 200-pound like package from a plane to see where things would scatter and land and stuff like that. But they, again, like mistakes in calculation, I think kind of ruined things for them. There were a lot of theories about him, understandably. Legends kind of just grew, and there were supposed discoveries of this ransom money that were scattered all over the place. Some of it was found burned, things like that. It was really, really weird. But what are your thoughts? Like, what do you think about the whole thing?
I mean, the one I remember hearing is that he was Tommy Wiseau, or whatever the name of the guy is from The Room. I know that's been debunked, but that was like my favorite theory about who he could possibly be. I don't know who he was. I don't think we will ever really know. What I do think is that, because there's a lot of theories about like whether or not he survived like the jump from the plane, right? Like whether or not he died on his way down or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I fully think this guy just 100% got away with this crime. He planned it. He knew exactly how he was going to get away with it. For whatever reason, they could not catch him. They could not track him. And he lived happily ever after. He probably exchanged his money at some place that he had already thought of, and he wound up walking away scot-free. I love this mystery. I think it's so much fun to cover just because it's one of those things where it's like, he fucking got away. Like, he 100% outsmarted the authorities, and he got away. And I think he survived and was just ultimately 100% successful in what he was trying to do. As far as who he could be, I will say Loki. Loki makes more sense than Doctor Who. So
I want to believe that this guy escaped and totally got away with it, took his money with him, maybe laundered it, lived a great life, or maybe he just did this whole entire thing for fun, because they would know if the money was floating around in our system. If he somehow got it found a way to use it, right? That money would be recorded because the serial numbers were very specific. They even took microfiche of every single bill, every dollar bill.
Micro what?
Microfiche.
What's that?
It's, you ever seen those movies where they're going through newspaper articles with that machine that they just flip through all the different, a micro, So they did that for each bill. I don't know who it could have been exactly with all the different theories and suspects that they had, but I really want to know. I don't think this falls under rating rules, like whether or not it was plausible or anything like that, because it did happen. This happened. This guy got away with all this money. Whether he survived or not, you don't know. But like the fact that this heist took place and he freaking disappeared is nuts. I just want to know who. I want to know how. I want to know what happened to them. Like, you're probably like way out of the
statute of limitations.
Yeah, they can't do anything to you anymore, right? So come out and tell us if you're still alive.
Tell us. Reach out to us. Storytime@scaryish.com. We'll set up a live show.
Dude, that'd
be so much fun.
Freaking sweet.
Can tell us all about it.
So much changed with the FAA and aircraft design because this guy got away with this shit. Now there's more secure air travel. Of course, that has to do with 9/11 for the most part. But, since like right after that happened, around that time, things changed. There was more secure air travel. That's when they started searching bags and passengers. And then there was the device dubbed the Cooper vane that was installed on planes that prevented the lowering of the back air stairs mid-flight. They even installed peepholes on cockpit doors so that they could see what was going on in the cabin. Overall, I mean, this guy is just straight up gangsta. He freaking got away with this. And to this day, everyone talks about how big of a mystery he was. So.
I mean, he was literally represented in the freaking Marvel series.
Freaking
Loki,
legend.
You know, he's a fucking legend, 100%. So just let us know who you are, and it'll be fun. We'll have you on the show.
Yep. Hashtag confirmed legend.
Yes. All right, so we're going to move on into the sixth and final topic of the recap episode, or whatever we're going to name this show. And I think you guys probably guessed it. We're going to cover one of the biggest and most requested topics we've ever covered, one that draws skepticism from so many people, and just such dedicated belief. Yes, 6 out of 6 is Bigfoot. Robin spoiled this one also. Okay. So if you want to listen to the Bigfoot episode, you can go back to episode 90 where I cover this one. This is one of my longest scripts that I had done to that point. I think it might have actually been the longest. But all right. This was one of our most requested topics for the longest time. One of the most important things to keep in mind with Bigfoot or Sasquatch is the origin of the cryptid. It's said to have been told in story form from Native Americans and indigenous people in this area of the Pacific Northwest and other parts of Canada as well. So Sasquatch is one of the terms for Bigfoot. It comes from Sasquatch, which is Halkamalum, which is a First Nations language. It means wild man. Stories about Sasquatch came from many places, including British Columbia, since back in the mid-1800s, where it was documented that these stories were being passed around. And Americans didn't take it seriously. There were actually articles about like how dumb Canadians were for believing in this wild man legend until people started, quote unquote, seeing it in the Pacific Northwest states, Washington, Oregon, and the Pacific Northwest parts of California. Stories about Sasquatch started to pick up speed after the origins of the quote unquote Bigfoot legend hit in 1950s. Breaking this down really quickly, it's a group of construction workers having equipment go missing, including big like tires and shit that shouldn't be moved. A lot of it winds up damaged after the fact. And it is really important to note that most of the folks involved in the original Bigfoot story, stating that it was this giant creature that came out of the forest and was like throwing this shit around, admitted that it wasn't real and they were lying, including and especially the guy who made the footprints in the ground where one of the famous pictures of the cast of the foot can be seen. That was fake. The guy admitted it was fake. He was very vocal about them being fake, but it got picked up by a lot of people and perpetuated as being something that was real. Those same folks who perpetuated it are those who had heard of and believed in the Sasquatch legend prior to this. So separating Bigfoot from Sasquatch is kind of important to me, and I'll tell you why when we get to the rating system. Okay. So it's also worth noting with what happened to the indigenous people getting constantly pushed off their land, that they were telling this story about this wild man that lives in the woods that you should be afraid of. It is possible a legend was created and was being used to try and make the land seem undesirable to a people that seemed intent on taking every bit of this land that these indigenous people were living on, you know?
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
Yeah. But the legend of a creature like Sasquatch is known all over the world by a bunch of different names. Yeti, skunk ape, bunch of swamp monsters. So this is a tough one. This is one of the ones that draws the most opinions from folks out there. So I would like to know, Robin, what is your opinion at this point on Bigfoot / Sasquatch?
I think it is possible that there is some creature out there that is very hard to find, but does live within, you know, our national park system. Maybe not necessarily a large quantity of them, but there has to be enough for them to breed, right? Because they've shown up for years and years and years, decades. And there's got to be a way for them to breed, a big enough colony for them to breed, but not enough that people see them very often. And I think they avoid people on purpose, but like any other animal, because we keep building into their territory, they start showing up you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So you're going to go with plausible.
Yeah.
All right. So here's how I want to present my opinion here. Bigfoot, the legend of Bigfoot, the original story of Bigfoot, I think that's all bullshit. I think those guys were just sort of making it up to fuck with their superiors. I think it was a story that like kind of got away from them, and as soon as it hit the public's eye, it got wrapped up with the Sasquatch myth, and because of that, it got spun up into it. I don't think the original legend of Bigfoot is true whatsoever. I think it's busted. I think just about everything that had anything to do with it has come out and stated it was fake. So as far as Bigfoot goes, I say that shit is busted. As far as Sasquatch goes,
okay.
The idea of a wild man that lives in the woods, that is like what we picture in America as Bigfoot. When you think of Bigfoot, you think of that video of the thing walking through the woods. Like, I think it's entirely plausible there is a species that exists, like Robin stated, in our national forests and in like the dense thicket and places we cannot get to, really, that it's 100% possible something like this exists. I am still skeptical when I think about it this way, because to me, it doesn't seem like something that no one would know about. I think that if they do exist, the government would know about it, and that's why they have specific nature preserves and part of like national forests that are inaccessible to people, that you're not allowed to go to unless you're like a park ranger.
Oh, it's because the village is there.
Sure. It actually reminds me of that American Horror Stories episode, the one shot where like the kid gets lost in the woods and they find that like what's really happening in all these different national forests, and the reason park rangers exist is because there's like a group of rabid people that live in all these different forests, and the kid got taken by them. I think that entire scenario would play out in the way I think of this as like, it's actually Sasquatches. Like, they're there to protect their natural environment. And for whatever reason, there's something that keeps the government from telling us and confirming, yeah, they totally fucking exist. I don't think it's that big of a deal for us to know that, unless there's something special about, like, their dicks are fucking uranium or something weird like that. Or I have no idea what it could be.
There are underground tunnels, underground caves, tunnels, things like that, that run through our national park system. Have you ever seen that map? You've probably seen that meme where it's
the map that overlaps the disappearances in the United States with the tunnel system in the United States. Yeah, that's fucking terrifying. It's 100%.
Terrifying. And it just makes me think that there are creatures that live down there, man, in those caves and tunnels. There has to be.
Cave ape. It could be a cave ape this whole time. We're just getting it wrong. That was living in the mountains,
right? Those live in caves, right?
Well, that's what
Or is it just on mountains? I don't know.
Well, yetis are supposed to be in like the snowy mountains. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's the other thing I was going to bring up, is that there are so many different legends of this creature all over the world. It's not just the Pacific Northwest of the United States, where the indigenous people might have made this up to keep, like, you know, their land from getting taken. It's everywhere. So it makes sense that in places that have a similar like biome or just a similar mountainous region, it's possible that these things do exist in low numbers, and, you know, people have come across them and they've avoided them, and they avoid human beings specifically because, you know, human beings are a fucking nightmare and they just don't want to deal with it. So I think this is plausible. I think that since I was a really hard skeptic on this one at first, and before I did it, I was an even harder skeptic. As time has passed, I've softened on this a bit more. I have thought more and more about the fact that just because I think the Bigfoot instance was bullshit in the 50s, a creature like Sasquatch absolutely could exist when you take everything into account. The only thing I don't understand is someone has to know about it, and why wouldn't they just confirm it? You know, that's the part of it that's hard for me. But overall, I would slap plausible on this one as well. So
nice.
Right on. I had fun going through these topics again. Like, looking at our old scripts was kind of a blast to be like, man, like, we didn't used to write very long scripts, but the episodes used to be so long. How?
I don't know how. Yeah, it was crazy seeing how much we write now compared to back then, because back then it was like 1 page, done. But now we're like, 2 pages isn't enough, man. I got to keep writing. You know what I mean?
I think our research skills have drastically improved too.
That's true too. Yeah. And I kind of want to add more details all the time with all our topics, because it becomes more fun and you guys get to learn a little bit more. We add stupid history, tidbits, knowledge nugs.
I always try and find something that is confirmation from an authority figure or some form of proof So I'm always digging through these archived records, and I didn't used to know how to do that or where to find them. And we've definitely come a long way in the way we handle these topics, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully you folks enjoyed this little walk down memory lane of topics we've done in the past and how maybe our opinions on certain things have changed or have stayed the same. I don't know. Or maybe you guys are learning something new about how we felt about certain things. Who knows? I hope you guys enjoy my little conspiracy theories about everything. And yeah.
And I hope us covering these things again hasn't brought anything up that's re-triggered you, but I want to go ahead and reiterate, if you listened to it the first time and you listen to it again this time and you're triggered both times, don't add us. Like, if you're going to add us with triggered stuff, just go ahead, type it out, and then delete the tweet, because we don't want to see it. If you do want to reach out to us and state, hey, I would love for you guys to revisit this particular topic, I would love to hear some feedback. I will say the one that I still think of that I almost added to this list is Skinwalker Ranch. Because when you covered Skinwalker Ranch, multiple people were like, fuck Adam. And they were upset because I wasn't more terrified or like impressed with the legend of Skinwalker Ranch. Because I just sort of listened to it matter-of-factly, like, that shit is scary. But I wasn't like mortified by everything that I heard. So that might wind up on another one of these episodes in the future. But if you have any in particular that you're looking for, definitely hit us up and let us know. If you have a story you would like to send our way, it does not have to be about any of these topics. It could be supernatural, paranormal, coincidental, true crime, extraterrestrial, whatever. Email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It does come directly to us. Or you can hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod. And Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1 a do. You can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast, and those are one-time donations. So all your donations are really amazing, and we're so thankful, and we really couldn't do this without you. Special shout out to Jessica, Catherine, and Ethan for being such super supporters of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are amazing. We appreciate you. And this is really fun. I hope to do another episode like this again in the future. So that's everything we have for episode 220. Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.